Kia kura rangatira, no mai rā ki Marae. Now soon we'll be talking to Te Hunga Roia Måori ko-tumuaki lawyer Natalie Coates about the hot topics affecting Māori at the moment. Engari tuatahi, international basketball superstar Steven Adams says he'll always call Aotearoa home. From Texas to Aotearoa, he's been bouncing around the country with a team of experts helping rangatahi to enhance their sporting talents while raising awareness about the benefits of basketball. He says he's giving back, providing high schoolers with the skills to be athletes. He's hands-on and the rangatahi tell us they love it. The annual Steven Adams High School Invitational is more than on-court skills and drills. The camps provide personal development from coaches and mentoring from exceptional leaders like Willie Apiata, Victoria Cross recipient. He sat down with Jodi Ihaka.
Yes, we are.
Have you been welcomed home?
Have I been welcomed? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, family was there, friends, Pathway boys. It's awesome, especially this one's pretty special because we started the camps back up. So that's the best welcoming, welcome home type thing.
Why do you do the camps?
I think it's an opportunity to not only just give back, but to increase the just the hype around basketball because it's been so giving to me. That I think that there's a lot more avenues. I know I went down the NBA path, but there's a lot more pathways that could be accessible. And if kids choose to play that sport, I love the sport, so I just want to introduce kids, and if they love it, then they could join in,
How are the kids when you first meet them?
They're usually taken aback by the height, very scary for them, and then they adjust and they're like, wow, you know what I mean? Because it's just, you know how little kids are. They want high fives, they can't reach, stuff like this. It's all fun.
Are they starstruck?
I think so, but yeah, if it's the height first and then starstruck, So it goes in that order typically.
How hard is it for these kids to be part of your camp?
I don't think it's very difficult at all. Now, in terms of numbers, we can only take on so many kids, and it's only like 3 camps, So in terms of that, of course, we can't get all the kids, but we also try and just spread out as much as we can year to year to try and target a lot of these cities that we may, we think that we need to put our presence in that area, We always hear about the All Blacks. Yeah.
So how do you see your job in terms of teaching New Zealanders that there's other things out there than rugby?
I mean, I just took the fun approach, No, nothing too serious, just if you want to play the game, you play the game, you know what I mean? And then it will evolve as it evolves. There's no real, I don't believe too much in hard borders sort of things, because it's again, sport is more artistic, I think. Especially basketball, it's a more artistic sport, So saying that you kind of follow some player and then you take on what they know and then you kind of make it your own and then you evolve the game in that sense. And it's been how it's been since the dawn of basketball itself, So everyone usually always pays kudos to those who came before us and whatnot.
Do you find any commonality with you and these kids, starting off passionate about the game?
Yes, yeah. In that sense, yeah. That's one of the things that hit home for me when I'm giving back, because the fun of basketball for me changes because it's my job, and so I'm stuck around it a lot. Standards are very different, so you have to kind of redefine fun when you're playing at the level that I'm playing at. So it is nice to go back to the grassroots where it is innocent and pure, just joyful, what it's meant to be, because it is a game. At the end of the day, it's just a game, just game basketball. You're definitely one of these kids who just love shooting the basketball, playing, hanging out with your friends. That's all it's a reminder of, and it's just, you have to really be there, honestly. It's a different thing when you see kids light up when they're just, they'll make a bucket, they'll make a layup or something, and they're just so, whoa, they're very excited, happy. And just to witness that, over the camps is just like, yeah, it's pretty priceless, eh?
I saw Willie Apiata VC out there. How do you know him and what do you guys do?
No, he's one of the boys. He came in and supported us throughout the camps. He also hosted us to go to the facility that he used to work out at when I bought the Oklahoma City Thunder staff and all that. So he hosted us with that. So like there's some ties historically with him. That's been like, yeah, it runs deep. He's very well respected amongst all the boys here. Just because of how he holds himself, he's very much like one of the ones where you do want people to look at him for how his approach to things. His mind is like, it just ticks differently, and it's inspiring.
How hard is it for you to come back to New Zealand to kind of convince these kids that they could be like you?
It's not convincing them to be like me. That's not the goal at all. Now, I have a platform that I want them to access basketball, especially in a fun way, if they want to be. But they need to be themselves. There's not be Steven Adams or anything. Like, every player is different. And also basketball evolves, every year. You can go 10 years from now and a Steven Adams will come about, but like the game's changed, so he may not make it. So there's no point in me trying to make kids like me, because they need to evolve to their environment. And I'm not in their environment, so they could grow how they go. Now, can I help them with certain things? Of course, we'll do whatever we can, but it's going to be their path,
You are incredibly humble. How does that American trash talk sit with you?
People leave me alone. I think it's because I'm big, so they don't want to hear. I think it's because I'm big, so they don't want to mess around. But yeah, no one really trash talks me. But I trash talk on the court too. You know what I mean? Like there's a different persona that comes in. Like you're playing because it's competitive. You just naturally trash talk. But yeah, it's all fun and games.
Feel good to be home, catching up with mates as well?
No, 100%. It's always fun. It's been really busy, but it's been good busy. I get homesick very easily. Even after all the years, still get homesick because it is home for me, New Zealand. So in terms of just like getting the spirits up and I don't know, good feed the soul type behaviours, like it's just great. Like, that's why I love coming back. So whatever I can do in New Zealand, it feels like amazing,
Choice one, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
The kids love you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, yeah?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ka rawi nā kōrero, e mihi atu ana ki a kōrua. We're going to read a statement to you now. Now, the Hobson's Pledge advertisement in the New Zealand Herald on Wednesday, 7th of August, in relation to the customary marine titles is likely to mislead, deceive or confuse consumers both explicitly and, by implication, ambiguity, exaggeration and false representation. It's also likely to fuel racism against Māori. That's from the Māori Law Society, who are looking at advertising breaches by the New Zealand Herald after publishing a front-page advertisement from a right-wing lobby group. So I'm joined in studio by Te Hunga Roia Måori, ko tumuaki Natalie Coates, of course, as I've just said, from the Māori Law Society. Lovely to see you. Ngā mihi nui kia koe.
Morena.
We're going to talk about this first, including the proposed changes to takutai moana to raise the bar for Māori to claim rights and the wider challenges to iwi Māori, like removal of 7AA and removing references to the treaty legislation. But let's talk about the New Zealand Herald ad first. It's reviewing its policies around advocacy advertising, and while doing that has rejected a further advertisement from Hobson's Pledge. Does this provide some comfort to you?
I guess that's the starting point, I think, in terms of us writing this letter, was that most people on there, myself included, we're really proponents of free speech, right? We support people's rights to healthy debate. But I guess where we've landed in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is that your ability to pay to say anything isn't unlimited. So there are standards that exist that prevent people from saying this cures cancer, or exploiting people, or publishing their public information. And there's also standards around truth. And so I guess as someone who saw that ad, I mean, your first reaction to that, my first reaction was, is this a glitch in the Matrix? Have we gone back sort of 20 years to 2004? because it's that similar messaging. But secondly, as a lawyer, that kind of legal instinct kicks in to say, and as someone who understands the law, the ad inaccurately kind of portrays what the legal position is here. And so I guess there was a group of us that were concerned about that. We're concerned about the messaging and the perceptions that people would get from this advertisement, and so looked at what the code was, and said, well, we don't think it meets that standard. And so, yeah, I mean, we then acted.
So Hobson's pledge says it's all factual. It came from Te Arawhiti. But of course, your response is, no, it's not. And you came up with 4 areas where you said, actually, this is where it's not correct. Should we just look at each one? So first, the advertisement calls for the restoration of the foreshore to public ownership. You guys said?
Well, I mean, we said that it's not. So it's restoration of public ownership. So we said, well, traditionally it's not owned by the public anyway. And in fact, the current legal status quo is that it's not owned by anybody. I think what we were more concerned about was that kind of paired with the rest of the language, which really gave the impression that as a result of Māori claims to this area, that Māori would come to own the foreshore and seabed, and therefore by implication of that, be able to prohibit people from accessing it, from navigating and fishing in that space. And so I think that was kind of more the concern, actually, was that people are getting a really wrongful portrayal of what the current legal status quo is in terms of that. I mean, there was a big picture that kind of said beach closed, right? And so that was our primary concern.
Secondly, the ad implies that customary marine titles give iwi, hapu and or whānau the right to own parts of the foreshore. You've just mentioned that there, but let's just clarify that.
Yes, like no is the answer to that, right? You don't own it. If you get customary title, it comes with a very limited subset of rights, but those rights don't prevent people from accessing it, navigating it and fishing. So those rights are specifically preserved by the legislation. And so people equate ownership with their houses and like things that they've bought from the shop that they can kind of possess and not let others go to. And so it's that kind of overly simplistic narrative that I think has that tendency to falsely mislead.
Māori are going to take everything away from us.
Well, exactly, yeah.
So thirdly, the ad implied a customary marine title would prevent New Zealanders from accessing beaches, including to fish and swim. And of course, as you just said, that's not true. The legislation enables the award of customary marine titles in securing public access to the foreshore. Fourthly, they say that contrary to the impression created by the advertisement, there are very hard legal tests to be met. And when I say they, I mean you, before a wāhi tapu, including a rāhui, will be recognised.
Yeah. So one of the concerns that we had with that is it kind of implies that Māori can willy-nilly place a rāhui to prevent people from, again, accessing and navigating the beaches. There is some provision within the legislation where wāhi tapu can allow some limited restricted access, although you can still it has to make sure that you can be able to fish adequately elsewhere. But it's not the case that you can kind of come and place a temporary rāhui for any reason, and that's legally enforceable under this legislation. It's just, again, not true, but the impression it's creating is that Māori kind of control and ability to stop people from preventing access to areas.
So then is the information that Hobson's pledge took from Te Arawhiti incorrect?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what they copied and pasted from Te Arawhiti. I haven't gone and looked at Te Arawhiti's website. I think what they took possibly from that website was the map that showed that there were customary marine title claims that are made in relation to most of the coastline of New Zealand, which is true. So I think one of the dangers of this kind of advertisement is it's pepper-potted with elements of the truth, but then it creates an overall impression, and there's dimensions of it that were clearly wrong. So
what do you want to see happen now?
I mean, part of the reason for the response was to help correct the information, because I think one of our huge concerns is actually that there is this impression that sort of Māori interest and actually what's given to Māori in that space is completely overflated, right? But so I guess in terms of, I mean, my concern is actually less about advertising standards and it's actually more about what the Crown is doing in this space, currently proposing legislative reform to further narrow and limit Māori rights in this space. And this campaign's kind of piggybacking off what the government is doing to create change, and they're wanting it to go further, right? They're wanting for all Māori rights to be extinguished, but kind of what's happening in terms of what the government's proposing to do is to narrowly limit those further, so by default it becomes an extinguishment of all Māori rights in this space.
So this ad comes at a time where there is high emotion and concern and a lot of need for discussion. Of course, this particular example, the detractors have said, well, when you say that you can no longer have this advocacy advertising, what you're doing is squashing free speech. Yeah. Before we take a break, very quickly, your views on free speech?
Oh, I'm a massive campaigner for free speech, right? I actually do genuinely believe that you need to have healthy debate about tricky issues, right? But this was not that. This was a breach of legal standards, and what we say went too far in terms of that. That wasn't healthy debate. That was misleading the public as to the impact and effect that this would have, and the Herald shouldn't be real estate for that.
Let's talk about the Treaty Principles Bill. The Waitangi Tribunal released a scathing report saying the bill ought to be abandoned. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has criticised the tribunal, saying its statement is a bit premature and that National will keep its coalition agreement and support the bill to the first reading, which he says will likely be introduced in early November. What's the next step here for you?
For Te Hunga Roia Māori or just next step in general?
Te Hunga Roia Māori.
Well, I guess one thing that we do as an organisation is we one of our functions is to kind of keep a critical eye on law reform, and we do advocate for the interests of Māori in that legal sphere, so in relation to te tiriti o Waitangi and generally, but also Māori rights and interests more generally. So I guess we've got subcommittee that are kind of looking at all of the developments in the space, and we help contribute to submissions from a legal perspective and general kind of awareness of the legal implications of particular legislation, of which that has will have a significant impact.
What's it like? I mean, how do you feel personally? I mean, we're in a time where this government wants to remove references to the treaty in legislation, remove 7AA, for example, looking at this Treaty Principles Bill. How are you faring at the moment as you face into these wero?
We're tired. Quite frankly, what we're seeing at the moment is a systematic attack on all things Māori in the law. It's across so many different areas. It's across environmental area, it's across family law, it's the Section 7AA stuff, it's the treaty principles more generally, and quite frankly it's just hard to keep a handle on all of the changes. It's kind of the scorched earth policy really that's currently taking place, and so it's deeply concerning on so many fronts, and we all sort of doing this just out of aroha because we really care about these issues from a legal perspective, and so yeah, it's a really challenging time, I think, not only as a lawyer but for all Māori in Aotearoa as we're seeing really regressive law being passed.
So taku time moana, the government wants to raise the bar there, and what's your action going to be?
The problem is there's actually not that much you can do when Parliament passes law, right? So, I mean, you can take judicial review procedures if they kind of, don't follow due and correct process, But I mean, the only thing we can do is mount an advocacy kind of campaign, or we make public submissions on why it's wrong. We've already done that. We've already lodged a submission in relation to the changes that are being proposed in that Maka takutai moana space, talking about retrospective lawmaking, inequality, the shrinking of Māori rights, the extinguishment of them in a de facto sense. Right? What we're trying to do is at least be able to say that when they made this law, they knew what they were doing.
So we need to have these hard discussions, and I don't think there's anyone that feels like these don't need to be discussed. But how do we do it in a healthy and useful way?
You mean just the general discussions about these really tricky issues?
Yes.
I mean, that's really hard, right? I mean, I think an important part of this, and this is why we were so concerned about the Hobson's pledge stuff, is the inaccurate portrayal of information through channels, right? Because people only become educated or aware of things through the media, through social media, or through conversations with friends, right? That's how you access information and how you then come to form your rational, reasonable opinion on a particular topic, right? And so if you've got, that's why you need responsible media reporting on it. People, to the extent possible, I know there's a big social media campaign trying to get accurate information out there on a whole bunch of these issues. So but then it's the conversations, it's the individual conversations that you have amongst your whānau, your friends, that really help, I think, bring out some of the robustness of some of these issues and the pros and cons for them. Often we're just speaking past each other, I think, a lot of the time.
And so it's
the algorithms in social media are not helpful.
Yes, that's a very good point to make. We have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your kōrero this morning, your whakaaro. So very appreciated.
Ngā mihi.
Ngā mihi. E te iwi kia ora, hui mai anō. Taupuruariki Whakataka Brightwell describes herself as an Indigenous pop culture artist of many trades. Irena Smith discovers the artistic and cultural knowledge running through the whānau.
The Brightwell kids share both Māori and Tahitian whakapapa and have been immersed in both cultures. It's where much of the inspiration of their art stems from.
So this one is called Moi Moi, and Moi Moi is the profound sense of nostalgia and longing that emerges once you embark on the journey of self-discovery.
The youngest of the Brightwell whānau knew from a young age that art would always be part of her everyday life.
All began in Tūranga. However, before I went to school, my family would travel to Tahiti very often. So I spent a lot of my time as a baby in Tahiti until I went to school, starting Te Hunga Roia in Tūranga, then going to Waikirikiri. And so from there, I was snuck out of school by my father to go to Whangara. Whangara was really where I really grew up in terms of my childhood, because when I was born, my father started the Wakatawa project, which was Te Aio Nuku Taimimiha, the giant war canoe. And so that waka took 10 years to build, so I was 10 years old when he finished it. So my whole first 10 years of my life, I was surrounded by the arts.
She views art as a gift handed down through generations on both her mum and dad's side, and now they are responsible for continuing to give life to them.
We all use it in different ways. So my brother, he expresses his through dance, choreography, and photography.
Marae catches up with Taupuruariki at the opening night of her brother Marae Kura's photography exhibition, Kanohi Ora, The Living Face.
So these are objects that I've collected along my journeys, and which is what we would have done, which is what we still do.
The whole whānau is there to support the exhibition, including Dad Mātahi Brightwell, tuhunga whakairo of ngā toroirangi rock carvings in Taupo, and a big influence on Taupuruariki's journey into the arts.
That's a massive component of that, because that's my upbringing. I was never told I had to do art. I was never made to feel like I had to do it because we're an art family. I did it. I grew up in the 90s, so a lot of the influence as well in my art is also pop culture. All the cartoons, sci-fi movies, Japanese comics and animation. So that was a huge influence on my creativity, as well as my heritage.
Artists also mirror the times they live in. This painting of Te Rauparaha with his middle finger up has provoked a lot of reaction from people. A response to the current political climate.
I saw the protest at Freiburg School in Palmerston North, where those students protested to David Seymour and lay the whittle down to him something triggered in me that day, thinking to myself, I have to express this in some way. In what way was it to paint Te Rauparaha performing that, but also when those kids sung Kamate in their protest? So basically, it's an amalgamation of many things. My upbringing, our history as Māori, my ancestors, what my family went through as well, the hardships we went through pursuing the arts in the face of adversity, and also seeing the younger generation fired up, challenging anything that's a threat to our country.
The confidence to push artistic boundaries comes in part from the strength and courage she found when she made the decision to outwardly embody the person she knew herself to be.
Whakawahine is the term, trans woman. I just identify as wahine Māori. And so I think, like myself and many others, we've always felt different in some way, you know. We didn't tick the tropes off that were shown to us on what gender is. So for me, for example, I didn't play rugby, I didn't do all that stuff, and I got picked on heavily for that. I got picked on heavily for being quite different in any aspect. However, I think it's hard, to explain it in a way, it's kind of like you're kind of been given someone else's shoes to wear. And those shoes are very tight and they're very sore, but you just put up wearing them. And so you get to a point where you decide to wear them until your feet blister and bleed. And at that point, bad things can happen. Or you decide right then, I'm taking the shoe off and I'm putting another shoe on, a shoe that fits. Once people realize that we are literally still the same person, nothing's changed about us. So I'm still the exact same person I was before. I'm just much more open, much more confident, much more planted in my feet. It became the main hub, the main route to make me the artist I am today.
Taupuruariki says she is lucky to have a supportive whānau, but it's not the case with many who are going through the same thing.
From my experience, my parents felt like they lost their child, but then they realized their child wasn't lost in the end. Their child just, opened up and really showed them who they were. And not many people get to have that or do that. You know, whether they have it in them or whether they live in a country where it's punishable by death or incarceration, as there is. Not everyone gets the luxury to do that.
Her advice to whānau struggling to accept their child's decision to transition:
I'm one of the lucky ones because I had a family that loved me no matter what, even though they disagree, right? However, but to those families who think they could just throw the one out on the streets because of that, have a think about it, have some aroha, because that aroha will grow your child into one of the most strongest people, most tuturu, most strongest standing child you can ever have. And you love your family enough, you look after your family enough, whoever they may be, it will be worth it in the end, and you'll have someone truly wonderful in your family.
Truly wonderful, truly herself, and leaving her mark on the walls, streets and everyday places of Pōneke for others to admire and be inspired by.
Kia ora. Ngā mihi nui I tā koutou mātakitaki mai. Kia haumaru te noho hei te rawiki. Ko te reo, te take.